In the gleaming conference room overlooking the city skyline, a massive sports car engine sat prominently on the mahogany table. Surrounded by executives in tailored suits who laughed mockingly, the beautiful CEO in her crisp white blouse and black pencil skirt leaned forward, pointing with a perfectly manicured finger, her arrogant smile widening. She delivered her challenge like a cruel joke. "If you can fix this engine, I'll marry you." Before all those watching eyes, the single father in his oil-stained uniform answered simply, "I can do it." William Carter wasn't always a mechanic working in the basement of Sterling Automotive's towering headquarters. At 36 years old, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that seemed at odds with his worn coveralls and calloused hands. His broad shoulders and strong frame spoke of physical labor, but his intelligent gray eyes hinted at something more. Once, he had been one of Sterling's most promising engineers, designing cutting-edge automotive technology in state-of-the-art laboratories. But life has a way of rewriting our stories. When his wife Sarah was diagnosed with a rare illness 5 years ago, William made a choice that would define him forever. He walked away from his corner office, his six-figure salary, and his promising career to become her full-time caregiver. For 2 years, he stayed by her bedside, holding her hand through countless treatments, whispering promises about their daughter's future, until the morning she finally let go. Now, he lived in a modest 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of the city, its garage converted into a small repair shop where he fixed neighbors' cars to make ends meet. The walls were lined with tools he'd collected over the years, each one meticulously maintained despite their age. His engineering degrees gathered dust in a box in the attic, relics of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. But William had never lost his self-respect, never let bitterness poison his heart. Every morning, he woke with purpose, not for himself, but for the bright-eyed little girl who depended on him for everything. Lily Carter was 7 years old and possessed a spirit that could light up the darkest room. Her ocean-blue eyes, inherited from her mother, sparkled with curiosity and intelligence beyond her years. She had her father's dark hair, which she insisted on wearing in 2 braids every day, just like the female engineers she'd seen in the old magazines William kept in the garage. While other children her age played with dolls or video games, Lily could often be found sitting cross-legged on the garage floor, studying automotive manuals with the concentration of a scholar. She knew the names of every tool on her father's workbench and could identify different engine types by sound alone. In the evenings, she would help William clean his tools, her small hands working alongside his large ones, chattering about her day at school or asking endless questions about how machines worked. She was his anchor, his reason for getting up each morning, the living reminder of the love he'd shared with Sarah. When William looked at Lily, he saw hope personified, and he'd sworn on his wife's memory that their daughter would have every opportunity to become whoever she wanted to be. Alexandra Sterling stood at the pinnacle of success at 34 years old. But her throne was a lonely one. As the only child of automotive tycoon Richard Sterling, she'd inherited not just his billion-dollar empire, but also his ruthless approach to business. Her beauty was undeniable. Platinum blonde hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, ice blue eyes that could freeze a boardroom with a single glance, and a figure that made her designer suits look like they were crafted specifically for her. But beauty and power had become both her weapons and her prison. She'd watched too many men circle her like sharks, their affections as transparent as glass, motivated by her wealth and position rather than any genuine connection. Each betrayal, each revealed ulterior motive, had added another layer to the armor she wore. Her penthouse apartment, with its panoramic city views and priceless art collection, felt more like a fortress than a home. She arrived at the office before 7 each morning, and rarely left before 10 at night, burying herself in quarterly reports and merger negotiations to avoid confronting the emptiness that gnawed at her when she was alone. Trust had become a foreign concept, vulnerability a weakness she couldn't afford. In her world, showing emotion was tantamount to showing your cards in a high-stakes poker game, so she played the part of the Ice Queen to perfection, her sharp tongue and cutting remarks keeping everyone at a safe distance. The morning had started like any other for Alexandra, with a presentation of Sterling Automotive's latest innovation, a revolutionary engine that promised to redefine performance standards in the luxury sports car market. The conference room was packed with board members, potential investors, and senior engineers, all eager to witness the unveiling of technology that had cost millions in development. Alexandra stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding attention as she spoke about market projections and competitive advantages. But when the lead engineer, Marcus Webb, attempted to start the engine for the demonstration, nothing happened, not even a sputter. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face flushed red as he fumbled with the controls, muttering about calibration issues and unexpected variables. Alexandra's perfectly composed expression began to crack, her jaw tightening with each passing second of failure. This was supposed to be her triumph, the project that would silence the board members who still whispered that she'd only gotten her position through nepotism. She could feel their judgment, their barely concealed satisfaction at watching her fail. "Someone fix this now," she commanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Her assistant scrambled to make calls, and within minutes, William Carter was summoned from the maintenance level where he'd been servicing the building's HVAC system. When William entered the conference room, tool bag in hand, the contrast couldn't have been starker. Here was a man in a stained uniform entering a space where $1,000 suits were the norm, where decisions affecting thousands of jobs were made over imported coffee and artisanal pastries. Alexandra's eyes narrowed as she took him in, her lips curling into a sneer. "Really? We're bringing in the janitor to fix our most advanced piece of engineering?" The room erupted in nervous laughter, executives eager to align themselves with their CEO's mockery. "He's not a janitor, ma'am," Marcus offered weakly. "He's one of our maintenance technicians." Alexandra circled the table like a predator, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "A maintenance technician," she repeated, her tone dripping with disdain. "Tell me, Mr. Carter," William supplied quietly. "Tell me, Mr. Carter, what makes you think you can fix what my team of MIT graduates couldn't?" William met her gaze steadily, unflinching, despite the hostility radiating from her. "Because I understand engines, ma'am. Sometimes, the most complex problems have simple solutions." The room fell silent, waiting for Alexandra's response. She laughed, a cold, bitter sound that echoed off the glass walls. "You understand engines? This isn't some rusty pickup truck from your garage. This is a $3 million prototype, using technology you couldn't begin to comprehend." That's when she said it. The words that would change everything. "I'll tell you what, Mr. Carter. If you can fix this engine, I'll marry you. That's how confident I am that you'll fail." William set down his tool bag with deliberate calm and approached the engine. His movements were methodical, purposeful, as he removed the sleek carbon fiber cover to reveal the mechanical marvel beneath. The room watched in skeptical silence as he examined the complex array of components, the twin turbochargers, the custom fuel injection system, the revolutionary valve timing mechanism that had taken years to perfect. Executives whispered among themselves, some pulling out phones to record what they assumed would be a spectacular failure. "He's going to damage it," someone murmured. "This is a liability nightmare waiting to happen." Another added. Alexandra stood with her arms crossed, her expression a mask of amused contempt. But William paid no attention to the commentary. He pulled a clean rag from his pocket and wiped his hands before touching the engine, a gesture of respect for the machinery that didn't go unnoticed by some of the engineers present. His fingers moved across the components with surprising familiarity, checking connections, testing tensions, evaluating pressures. He pulled out a small flashlight and peered into spaces others hadn't thought to examine. Just then, the conference room door opened quietly, and Lily slipped inside. She'd been waiting in the lobby with the security guard, who sometimes watched her after school when William had to work late. Seeing her father, surrounded by all these important-looking people, she walked straight to him, with the confidence only a child could possess, holding out a water bottle. "You forgot this, Daddy," she said softly. William paused his work to smile at his daughter, taking the water gratefully. "Thank you, sweetheart. Wait right over there, okay? I'll be done soon." Lily nodded and moved to stand by the window, her eyes bright with interest as she watched her father work. As William continued his examination, his mind drifted to another time, another life. He remembered standing in a laboratory not so different from this conference room, surrounded by computer screens displaying three-dimensional engine models he'd helped design. He'd been 28 then, full of ambition and dreams, working 18-hour days to perfect the initial prototype of what would become Sterling's signature V8 engine series. Sarah would bring him dinner at the office, sitting on his desk while he explained his latest breakthrough, her eyes lighting up with pride. Even though she didn't understand half of what he was saying, he remembered the day he'd presented his first major innovation to Richard Sterling himself, how the older man had clapped him on the shoulder and said he saw great things in William's future. But that future had taken a different path. When Sarah got sick, none of those achievements mattered anymore. The patents with his name on them, the bonuses, the corner office with a view, he'd traded it all for precious time with the woman he loved. Now, as his hands worked on this new engine, muscle memory kicked in. He recognized the underlying architecture, could see the evolution of designs he'd once sketched on napkins during late-night brainstorming sessions. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, fixing a descendant of his own creation, while the daughter of his former boss mocked him for being beneath her. But there was no bitterness in the recognition, only a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his work had lived on, had continued to evolve even in his absence. William identified the problem within 20 minutes. A microscopic misalignment in the fuel pressure regulator combined with a software calibration error that created a feedback loop, preventing ignition. It was subtle, the kind of issue that could drive engineers crazy because it didn't show up in standard diagnostics. But William had encountered similar problems before, back when he was developing the original systems. He made quick adjustments, his movements precise and economical. The room had grown quieter now, the mocking whispers replaced by curious observation. Even Alexandra had stopped her commentary, watching with an expression that had shifted from amusement to something harder to read. William made one final adjustment, then stood back, wiping his hands on his rag. The moment of truth had arrived. He looked at Marcus and nodded. "Try it now." Marcus hesitated, glancing at Alexandra for permission. She gave a curt nod, her jaw tight. Marcus turned the key. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the engine roared to life, its sound pure and powerful, filling the conference room with a symphony of perfectly calibrated mechanical precision. The digital displays lit up, showing optimal readings across every metric. The engine purred like a satisfied predator, running smoother than it had even during initial testing. The silence that followed was absolute. Phones that had been recording slowly lowered. Executives who had been smirking moments before now stared in stunned disbelief. Marcus ran diagnostic after diagnostic, each one confirming what they could all hear. The engine was running perfectly, better than perfectly. It was running at efficiency levels they hadn't even achieved in laboratory conditions. Alexandra stood frozen, her carefully constructed mask of superiority cracking like ice under spring Sunday. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. The mockery she'd been ready to unleash died in her throat. Lily, meanwhile, had jumped up from her spot by the window, running to embrace her father. "I knew you could do it, Daddy. I knew it." She wrapped her small arms around his waist, her face beaming with pride. William hugged his daughter back, his large hand gently smoothing her dark hair. He wasn't gloating, wasn't even looking at Alexandra or the stunned executives. His focus was entirely on Lily, on the joy in her eyes, the faith she'd never wavered in. It was Harold Brennan, the oldest member of the board, who broke the silence. He'd been with Sterling Automotive for 40 years, had seen hundreds of employees come and go. He stepped forward, his weathered face creased in recognition. "My God," he said slowly, his voice carrying across the room. "You're William Carter. You're the Carter who designed the original Sterling V8 series." Heads swiveled between Harold and William. Younger employees looked confused, but the senior staff began to murmur with recognition. "He was one of our best," Harold continued, his voice gaining strength. "Left about 5 years ago. Personal reasons. If I recall correctly. Richard always said losing you was one of the company's greatest losses." Marcus dropped the diagnostic tablet he was holding. It clattered on the table, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "You designed the foundation architecture for our entire engine line?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. William simply nodded, neither confirming nor denying beyond that simple gesture. He didn't mention the 72-hour stretches without sleep perfecting combustion ratios, didn't talk about the breakthrough that had saved the company millions in development costs, didn't reference the 3 patents that still bore his name in the company archives. Alexandra's transformation was painful to watch. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking younger, more vulnerable than anyone in the room had ever seen her. Her hands, usually so steady when signing multi-million-dollar contracts, trembled slightly. "You were one of our engineers?" she asked, her voice barely recognizable, stripped of its usual commanding tone. "You worked here?" William finally looked at her directly, his gray eyes calm and without accusation. "A long time ago," he said simply, "in a different life." The weight of her earlier words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Everyone remembered her mockery, her cruel laughter, the impossible challenge she'd thrown out like garbage. The very man she'd humiliated had once been instrumental in building the foundation of her empire. Some of the executives couldn't meet William's eyes, remembering their own laughter, their own participation in the mockery. Alexandra's assistant had gone pale, realizing she'd helped summon a former star engineer like he was hired help. Alexandra's mind raced, trying to reconcile the man before her with everything she thought she knew. This wasn't how the world worked in her experience. Talented engineers didn't become maintenance workers. People with the ability to fix $3 million prototypes didn't wear stained coveralls and carry lunch in paper bags. Yet here was William Carter, living proof that her assumptions about success and worth were fundamentally flawed. She watched him interact with his daughter, saw the gentle way he knelt to her level when she spoke, the patient smile when she asked if she could look at the engine closer. There was no bitterness in his demeanor, no resentment over his fall from grace. He possessed a peace that Alexandra, with all her wealth and power, had never found. "Why?" she found herself asking, the word escaping before she could stop it. "Why did you leave?" William stood slowly, his hand still resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. "My wife got sick," he said quietly. "Some things matter more than careers." The simple honesty of it hit Alexandra like a physical blow. She'd spent her entire adult life believing that career was everything, that success was measured in stock prices and market domination. Yet here was a man who'd walked away from it all, without apparent regret. The conference room began to empty as executives filed out, murmuring among themselves. The board members lingered, exchanging significant looks that suggested this incident would be discussed at length in future meetings. Marcus approached William hesitantly, extending his hand. "That was incredible," he said with genuine admiration. "The way you diagnosed that issue. I've been working on this engine for 2 years and never would have found that." William shook his hand briefly. "You would have found it eventually. Sometimes fresh eyes help." But Alexandra remained rooted in place, her entire worldview shifting beneath her feet like tectonic plates. She'd built her life on certain truths. That power protected you, that vulnerability was weakness, that showing emotion was dangerous. William Carter's very existence challenged every one of those beliefs. He'd been vulnerable, choosing love over ambition. He'd shown tremendous emotion, dedicating himself to his sick wife. He'd given up power and position, yet he stood before her with more dignity than any executive in a corner office. As the room cleared, leaving only Alexandra, William, and Lily, the CEO found herself at a loss. She'd spent years perfecting the art of the cutting remark, the dismissive gesture, the power play that kept others at bay. But none of those tools worked here. William wasn't seeking her approval, wasn't intimidated by her position, wasn't interested in impressing her. He was simply ready to leave, to go back to his maintenance work and his simple life with his daughter. "Wait," she said, the word coming out more desperate than she'd intended. William paused at the door, looking back with polite curiosity. Alexandra struggled to find words, something she'd never experienced in her life. I owe you an apology," she managed, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "What I said earlier was cruel and uncalled for." William studied her for a moment, then nodded slightly. "We all have bad days, Miss Sterling. Don't worry about it." But his easy forgiveness only made her feel worse. She'd humiliated him publicly, and he was letting her off the hook with grace she didn't deserve. 2 days passed before Alexandra summoned the courage to seek out William again. She found herself taking the elevator to the maintenance level, a part of the building she'd never visited in her 5 years as CEO. The contrast with the executive floors was stark. No marble, no artwork. Just functional spaces where real work got done. She found William in a small break room, eating a sandwich while reading a technical manual. Lily was at school, he explained when she asked. "May I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the plastic chair across from him. He nodded, and she sat, feeling overdressed in her designer suit in this humble space. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began carefully. "About some things mattering more than careers." William waited patiently, not rushing her. "I've never had that," she continued, surprising herself with the admission. "Something that mattered more than success. I wouldn't know what to do with it if I did." William considered this, then spoke thoughtfully. "It's not something you plan for. When Sarah got sick, there was no decision to make. How could I sit in meetings about profit margins when she needed me? How could I care about promotions when each day with her was a gift?" Alexandra felt something crack inside her chest, an ache she'd buried under years of ambition. "Do you regret it? Giving up everything you'd worked for?" William smiled, a soft, genuine expression that transformed his face. "I gave up a job, Miss Sterling. I kept everything that mattered." Their conversation was interrupted by Alexandra's phone buzzing with urgent messages. A crisis in the Tokyo office, apparently. She stood to leave, then hesitated. "Would you consider coming back? To engineering, I mean. We could use someone with your expertise." William shook his head gently. "My life is different now. Lily needs stability, routine. She's been through enough changes." But Alexandra wasn't ready to give up. Over the following weeks, she found herself making excuses to visit the maintenance level. She'd bring coffee, claiming she'd ordered an extra by mistake. She'd ask William's opinion on technical matters, even though she had an entire engineering department at her disposal. Slowly, carefully, she began to understand the man behind the coveralls. She learned that he coached Lily's robotics club at school, teaching 7-year-olds the basics of mechanical engineering. She discovered he volunteered at a community center, fixing cars for single mothers who couldn't afford proper mechanics. She found out he'd been secretly maintaining the cars of several Sterling employees who were struggling financially, never accepting payment despite his own modest means. Each revelation deepened her respect and, though she was reluctant to admit it, her attraction. This wasn't the superficial interest she'd experienced before with men who wore expensive suits and drove luxury cars. This was something deeper, more unsettling. She found herself thinking about William at odd moments, during board meetings, while reviewing contracts, lying in her empty penthouse at night. She wondered what it would be like to have someone who would choose you over everything else, who would see past your defenses to the person underneath. The challenge she'd thrown out as a cruel joke began to haunt her. "If you can fix this engine, I'll marry you." He'd fixed it. He'd done what her best engineers couldn't. According to her own words, she owed him something she'd never intended to give. One evening, Alexandra stayed late specifically to catch William during his night shift. She found him in the parking garage, helping a secretary with a dead battery. After the grateful woman drove away, Alexandra approached. "You're always helping people," she observed. "Why?" William shrugged, cleaning his hands with his ever-present rag. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Today it's them. Tomorrow it might be me." She studied him in the fluorescent lighting of the garage, this man who'd once designed cutting-edge technology and now jump-started cars with equal satisfaction. "I meant what I said, you know," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "About marrying you if you fix the engine." William's eyes widened slightly, the first real surprise she'd seen him show. "Miss Sterling." "That was Alexandra," she interrupted. "Call me Alexandra, and I know what it was. It was cruel and arrogant, and everything I've become over the years. But you did it. You fixed what nobody else could." She took a breath, gathering courage she didn't know she possessed. "I'm not saying we should get married. That would be insane. But maybe we could have dinner? You and Lily? I'd like to get to know you both better." William was quiet for a long moment, and Alexandra found herself holding her breath. "Lily chooses the restaurant," he finally said. "And she has very strong opinions about dessert." Alexandra felt a smile, a real smile, spread across her face. "I think I can handle that." The dinner happened 3 days later, at a family restaurant that featured coloring mats and a dessert menu longer than the regular menu. Lily interrogated Alexandra with the intensity of a seasoned prosecutor, asking about everything from her favorite color to whether she knew how to fix cars. "Daddy says everyone should know how to change a tire," Lily informed her seriously. "Do you know how?" Alexandra admitted she didn't, and Lily immediately volunteered William to teach her, much to his amusement. Over the following months, these dinners became a regular occurrence. Alexandra discovered a world she'd never known existed. Science fairs where Lily presented projects William had helped her build, community gatherings where everyone knew each other's names, quiet evenings working on puzzles while rain tapped against windows. She learned to change a tire in her designer heels, much to William's barely suppressed laughter. She helped Lily with homework, finding unexpected joy in explaining business concepts to a 7-year-old who absorbed information like a sponge. Slowly, the ice around Alexandra's heart began to thaw. She found herself laughing at Lily's jokes, looking forward to William's quiet observations, feeling part of something real for the first time in her adult life. The Sterling board noticed the change in her. She was still brilliant, still driven, but the cutting edge had softened. She listened more, commanded less, and had even been seen smiling during meetings. The moment of truth came 6 months after that first dinner. William had invited Alexandra to Lily's school play, where she was playing a robot in a futuristic adaptation of Cinderella. Sitting in the cramped auditorium, surrounded by proud parents with their phones out, Alexandra felt more at home than she ever had in her penthouse. When Lily forgot her lines halfway through, William whispered them loud enough for her to hear, causing the entire audience to chuckle warmly. Alexandra found herself reaching for his hand, and he let her take it, their fingers intertwining naturally. After the play, as Lily bounced between them, chattering about the experience, a photographer from the school newspaper asked if they wanted a family photo. Before Alexandra could correct the assumption, Lily had pulled them both into frame, beaming at the camera. Looking at that photo later, Alexandra saw something she'd never expected to see: herself, genuinely happy, part of something bigger than corporate success. William was more cautious in his feelings, careful not to rush into something that could hurt Lily if it went wrong. But Alexandra was patient, understanding that trust had to be earned when a child's heart was involved. She didn't push, didn't demand, simply showed up consistently, proving through actions, rather than words, that she was serious about being part of their lives. She attended every robotics club meeting, every school event, every Saturday morning pancake breakfast that had become their tradition. She learned that Lily liked her eggs scrambled but not too dry, that William took his coffee black but secretly loved the fancy creamers Alexandra brought, that Saturday mornings were for farmers markets and Sunday evenings were for old movies. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Lily had gotten sick at school, nothing serious but enough to need to go home. The nurse called William first, but he was stuck in an emergency repair job across town. Then, to Alexandra's surprise, they called her. Lily had listed her as an emergency contact without telling anyone. Alexandra left a board meeting without explanation, driving to the school in record time. She spent the afternoon on the couch with Lily, reading stories and making soup, feeling a fierce protectiveness she'd never experienced before. When William arrived home, frantic with worry, he found them both asleep on the couch, Lily curled into Alexandra's side, a book still open between them. The look on his face in that moment, soft, vulnerable, full of something that might have been love, was worth more than any business deal Alexandra had ever closed. The official announcement came a year after that fateful day in the conference room. Alexandra stood before the same board members who'd witnessed her humiliation of William, but this time, everything was different. "I want to announce some changes to our corporate structure," she began, her voice steady and clear. "William Carter will be returning to Sterling Automotive as our new Chief Innovation Officer." The murmurs of surprise were expected. What wasn't expected was what came next. "I also want to be transparent about something personal," she continued, her eyes finding William and Lily in the back of the room. William and I are together. This company was built on family values by my father, and I intend to honor that legacy, not just in business, but in my personal life as well. She walked down from the podium, past the stunned board members, straight to William and Lily. Taking both their hands, she turned back to face the room. A year ago, I made a cruel joke about marrying the man who could fix our engine. What I didn't know was that I was talking to the man who'd helped build our foundation, who'd sacrificed everything for love, who taught me that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. The press conference that followed was unlike anything the automotive industry had seen. Instead of quarterly projections and market strategies, Alexandra talked about second chances, about the courage to admit when you're wrong, about finding love in unexpected places. William stood beside her, solid and steady, while Lily charmed every reporter with her precocious questions about when they were going to publish the story. Photos of the three of them appeared in business magazines and lifestyle blogs alike. But the one that went viral was a candid shot. Alexandra in her designer suit, William in his work clothes, and Lily between them, all three laughing at something off camera, looking like what they'd become, a family. The wedding, when it came, was small and perfect. Not the society event everyone expected from a CEO of Alexandra's status, but an intimate gathering in the community center where William volunteered. Lily served as both flower girl and best person, a role she'd invented for herself and insisted upon. Harold Brennan officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Alexandra wore a simple dress she'd chosen with Lily's help, and William wore the one suit he owned, the same one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral, now repurposed for a new beginning. In her vows, Alexandra spoke about learning to see past surfaces, about finding gold in unexpected places, about the man who'd taught her that fixing things wasn't just about engines but about hearts too. William's vows were shorter but no less meaningful, talking about second chances, about love that comes when you're not looking for it, about building a future from the pieces of the past. 3 years later, the conference room where it all began had been transformed into the Carter Innovation Lab, where young engineers were encouraged to think beyond conventional boundaries. A plaque by the door read, "In memory of Sarah Carter, who taught us that love is the greatest innovation." William ran the lab with the same quiet competence he brought to everything, mentoring young talent and developing technologies that would define the next generation of automotive excellence. Alexandra had evolved too, her leadership style transformed by the lessons learned from a man in coveralls who'd chosen love over ambition. The company thrived under their joint guidance, but more importantly, so did their family. Lily, now 10 and even more brilliant, had a baby brother named Samuel, who'd inherited his father's calm demeanor and his mother's determined spirit. The story of the CEO who mocked a single dad became legend within Sterling Automotive, told to new employees as a reminder that talent can wear any uniform, that respect should be given freely, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected challenges. Employees would sometimes see the three of them, now 4, walking through the building together. Alexandra in her power suits, William in whatever he happened to be wearing that day, Lily chattering about her latest invention, and baby Samuel in William's arms. They were an unlikely family, born from a moment of cruelty transformed into something beautiful. Proof that love doesn't follow corporate hierarchies or social expectations. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the house was still, Alexandra would sometimes think about that day in the conference room. She'd remember her cruel words, the laughter of the executives, the moment the engine roared to life. But mostly, she remembered the quiet dignity of the man who'd fixed more than just a machine that day. He'd fixed her understanding of what really mattered, shown her that wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in the richness of connections, taught her that power meant nothing compared to the strength found in vulnerability and love. William would find her in these moments of reflection, always knowing when she needed the reassurance of his presence. He'd pull her close, this man who'd given up everything and gained even more, who'd taught a CEO that the most complex problems often had the simplest solutions, who'd proven that love was the greatest engine of all. The story could have ended there, with the warmth of a family gathered around a dinner table, the laughter of children filling rooms that had once echoed with loneliness, the quiet satisfaction of lives well lived. But life, like engines, keeps moving forward. Sterling Automotive continued to innovate, with Williams' designs winning awards and Alexandra's leadership garnering international recognition. But their greatest achievement wasn't measured in profit margins or market share. It was in the way Lily grew up confident and kind, knowing she was loved unconditionally. It was in Samuel's first steps, taken in the same garage where William had once taught Lily about engines. It was in the quiet Sunday mornings when they all worked on projects together, the CEO and the mechanic, the little girl who dreamed of building rockets, and the baby who watched everything with wide, wondering eyes. The company culture had transformed too, influenced by the unlikely love story at its helm. The maintenance staff was no longer invisible, their contributions recognized and valued. The engineering department learned to collaborate with the practical wisdom of those who worked with their hands every day. The boardroom, once a place of cold calculations, had become a space where human values were weighed alongside profit projections. Alexandra had learned to lead with both strength and compassion, while William had found a way to pursue his passion for innovation while keeping his family at the center of his life. Years later, when business students studied the transformation of Sterling Automotive, they would focus on the metrics, the increased productivity, the breakthrough technologies, the market expansion. But those who really understood what had happened knew it was about something more fundamental. It was about the moment when a woman who had everything realized she had nothing that mattered. When a man who had lost everything showed her what wealth really meant. When a little girl's faith in her father changed the course of multiple lives. It was about fixing what was broken. Not just in engines, but in hearts. Not just in corporate structures, but in human connections. The engine that William fixed that day still sits in the Carter Innovation Lab, preserved as a reminder. Sometimes, young engineers ask about it, and William tells them the story. Not the version that became corporate legend, but the real one, about fear and courage, about loss and redemption, about the unexpected places where love takes root. He tells them about Sarah, whose memory inspired him to choose love over career. He tells them about Lily, whose unwavering faith gave him strength. And he tells them about Alexandra, who had the courage to change, to admit she was wrong, to open her heart despite years of protecting it. Alexandra, for her part, keeps the photo from Lily's school play on her desk, the one where they were mistaken for a family, before they actually became one. It reminds her of the journey from mockery to respect, from isolation to connection, from a cruel challenge to a love that transformed everything it touched. Sometimes, during difficult board meetings or challenging negotiations, she glances at that photo and remembers William's words. Everyone needs help sometimes. It had taken her years to understand that accepting help, showing vulnerability, admitting imperfection, these weren't weaknesses but the greatest strengths of all. The ending of their story wasn't really an ending but a beginning. Of a family built on unexpected foundations. Of a company renewed by remembering its human heart. Of lives enriched by choosing love over fear. Every morning, William still woke with purpose. But now it extended beyond just Lily, to encompass Alexandra and Samuel too. Every evening, Alexandra returned not to an empty penthouse, but to a home filled with the beautiful chaos of family life. And in the garage of their modest house, they'd kept William's old home despite being able to afford anywhere. Lily worked on her own inventions, supervised by her father, encouraged by her stepmother, watched by her baby brother, continuing the legacy of fixing things, building things, creating things. The challenge thrown out in cruel jest, "Fix this engine and I'll marry you," had become their family's origin story, told with laughter now instead of pain. It was proof that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, that our worst moments can become the catalysts for our best ones, that love finds a way, even through the armor we build around our hearts. William had fixed the engine, yes, but more importantly, he'd fixed something in Alexandra that she hadn't even known was broken. And Alexandra, in opening her heart, had given William and Lily something they'd thought they'd lost forever. A complete family. A love that honored the past while building toward the future. In the end, it wasn't about the engine at all. It was about two people finding each other across a divide of class and circumstance. About a little girl who needed a mother and a woman who needed to learn how to love. About a man whose quiet strength changed everything around him simply by being himself. It was about the truth that real power isn't in commanding others, but in lifting them up. That real success isn't measured in achievements, but in relationships. That real love doesn't mock or belittle, but builds and strengthens and transforms. The engine had just been the beginning, the catalyst that set everything in motion. What followed was life itself. Messy, beautiful, complicated, and worth every single moment.